Welcome to the No BS Spiritual Book Club's live streaming interview series, where leading new thought teachers, speakers, and authors share the intimate stories behind the 10 best spiritual books that inspired them the most on their spiritual journey. From well-known classics to hidden gems you might never have heard of, the No BS Spiritual Book Club saves you time and money by sharing reliable recommendations from those who've walked the path before you. The No BS Spiritual Book Club, the only no BS guide to the best spiritual books to inspire your own journey of self-discovery. Here's your host, founder of the No BS Spiritual Book Club, Sandie Sedgbeer.
Hello, welcome. Recurring dreams are not unusual, but if you had one that revealed a blueprint for a new world and interaction with other life forms, how far would you go to manifest such an audacious vision? Jeanne White Eagle is a peace ambassador, educator, author, and visionary who circled the globe with her husband, John Pehrson, for over 25 years, working as ambassadors for world peace. A member of the Evolutionary Leaders Circle, her passion involves manifesting the vision she received in a recurring dream that began when she was a teenager. And she's been manifesting that vision along with the late NASA Astronaut Edgar Mitchell and her husband in co-founding the Interstellar Community Foundation to bring that vision to fruition. Jeanne White Eagle joins me now to share the 10 best spiritual books that significantly impacted her worldview as she undertook her far from ordinary life journey. Jeanne White Eagle, welcome.
Thank you, Sandie. It's an honor to be here.
So you say that choosing 10 books was difficult because there are so many that inspired you over the years.
Yeah, I hadn't really thought about this, but I think as the human race continues to evolve and wake up, more and more people are putting their thoughts into books, into different programs that you might see on TV or in movies or whatever, but they're getting out to the public what is going on with them, because this is my perception of this, is if you have something that is moving through you with such force and such power and such love, then there's something, at least this happens with me, there's something inside me that wants to share it, because maybe this can help somebody else on their path. And there have been a lot of books like that, especially in the last decades. And so we've had a rich wealth of books to draw from. And so for me to come in and try to hone in on 10 was difficult, because there are a lot of them out there.
Yeah.
Good ones.
Yeah. It is a hard thing to do. I love the quote that you said from Miss Cotton's Corner. Books are the quietest and most constant of friends. They're the most accessible and wisest of counselors and the most patient of teachers.
Yes, they are.
So true. So very true.
Yeah.
Well, let's start with the first book on your list. And I don't know if you compiled this list and gave it to me in the order that you read them, but it doesn't really matter. But the first book on your list, interestingly enough, was the last book on the last person's list. Autobiography of a Yogi by Paramahansa Yogananda, published in 1946. And I've lost count now of the number of times this book appears on people's lists.
Yeah. It's an extraordinary book. And when I was giving you my comments about each of the books on that particular one, I cannot remember when I first encountered it. It's as though it has always been there. And of course, for anyone who has read this book, the photograph of Yogananda on the front of it acts like a magnet, first of all. And the book itself holds within it such a wealth of wisdom. And I find that over the many decades that when I get into a place of despair, which doesn't happen often, but it has happened, when I get into a place of not knowing exactly where to turn, I'll remember something that Yogananda actually went through in his own life, that he writes about with such beauty and such poetry. And so I continue to turn to that book. As a matter of fact, I in the living room when we sit down and we watch something on the telly, I've got a copy of the book right by my chair, so I'm constantly, I see his face. So yeah, it continues to inspire me.
A book that really has influenced so many people. I think you said in your written write-up that Apple,
Yeah,
Steve Jobs
Steve Jobs. Yeah.
handed people books at his memorial to the people that were attending it because he
Right,
set such store by that book.
right.
Mm.
You think about that, because I'm sure there were a few that showed up at his memorial, but he arranged for everyone who showed up to have one of those books.
Yeah. Astonishing. So book number 2 is Being and Vibration by Joseph Rale, published in 1992. And there's a wonderful story here, synchronicities and mystical experiences.
Yeah. Well, this book is when my life took, and my husband's as well, took a 180-degree turn. John, my husband, he and I were in the corporate world, and we were in Russia at the time, right after perestroika. And we were doing a particular kind of workshop there with some Scott Peck's people. And one of the people on the team had a dream and called me. He came up to our room shortly after, and he said, "I've had a dream, and it's for you. I think it's for you." And so he told me the dream, and I memorized some of the words from it. Bald eagle, from the four winds, the grandmothers and the grandfathers are calling. The ancestors are calling Jeanne, and they cannot find her. And I remember when he said this, it was like, people talk about chills going over. Literally, a ripple went down my spine, because it was a sense of somebody's looking for me, but I don't know how to find them, because you can't write a letter if you don't know who to write to. You can't make a telephone call. So John and I, when we got back to the States, we got into our home here in Tennessee. And right when we got into the house, I went back and sat down on the bed in our bedroom, and I have at that time I had by the bed an end table that had a bunch of books on them, and that I hadn't read yet. And one of the books was called Being and Vibration, and I had been given the book 8 months before, but I hadn't read it yet. So when I sat down on the bed, all the books, I bumped the table and all the books fell off on the floor, except this one book. It flipped over on the bed. And as it did, I heard, "Your ancestors are calling." And I immediately began reading the book. And when I did, I'm looking through it and I'm thinking, I really would like to meet this person, but not till I finish the book. The next day, I get a telephone call from a friend I hadn't talked to for years. And she just wanted to do some catch up. And I said, Martha, I said, I think I'm being guided back into my work with sound. And she said, well, I think it's time now that you meet Joseph Ryle, who is the author of Being and Vibration. And she didn't know that I had started reading this book. So when she said this, I immediately said, I went, do, 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 like that's the theme song from Twilight Zone. And yeah. I said, I told her, I said, it feels like something's closing in on me. And I don't know, I don't understand it. I don't know what's happening. And she said, well, he's going to be in Tennessee in 2 weeks. I think you're to be there to meet him. So when we did meet, one of the first things that he said, I put the call out there. You heard, I knew you were coming. And he had seen me in a vision 12 years before. He had seen someone that was going to come in 12 years and carry on with this work. And it was the 12th month of the 12th year that I met him. So this book, as I said, our lives took a 180-degree turn. And I continue to refer back to it because it helps to keep me on point. It's a powerful book. Yeah.
Book number 3 is another very powerful book, because this also turns up in the top 10 all the time, top 10 of all time, in this book club. Jonathan Livingston Seagull by Richard Bach, published in 1970.
Yeah.
And you said that the character of Jonathan showed up for you at a Neil Diamond concert.
Yeah, we actually had gone to see one of Neil's, I guess, early concerts. This is way back in I'm 80 years now, growing newer every day. So this is back when I'm in my 20s. And we go to this Neil Diamond concert, and there Jonathan, of course, he was doing music to Jonathan Livingston Seagull, but something clicked when I heard it. And that night I went back and began writing the very first journal that I have ever written. And it started out with Dear Jonathan. And I still have that. I still have the journal, because somehow that awakened in me something that was asleep and was ready now to move on out into the larger world. It's hard not to like Jonathan Livingston Seagull. It's just hard not to. Whatever your belief system is. So I keep going back to it. By the way, I'm sure you know this, but my children gave me, they found a fourth segment to that book that is out. It's published now. It's out there. So that was one of the gifts they gave me last Christmas. So I encourage everybody who likes the book, the main book itself, go and look. There's a fourth segment to it now. It's quite good.
Interesting, very interesting. I mean, book number 4 is also by Richard Bach. It's Illusions, The Adventures of a Reluctant Messiah. And that was published in 7 years after. It's 1977.
Well, clearly I like Richard Bach's writing and inspiring. But the thing about Illusions is he was able to speak from a perspective that helped me not to get too attached to what I thought reality was, and helped me to see through different eyes. It's just, it's an ongoing, it's something I do turn to from time to time. And just when I think I may be stuck in some position of a thought or of a circumstance, I'll just kind of open up that book. And that's another one of the books that I keep next to my chair, and just pick it up and you just go to the very place that you need. But it's a good book, and it did help me to see all the many different realities that actually exist out there somewhere.
I've always wished that I could interview Richard Bach. I want to know, what was the inspiration for that? How did it come to him?
Yeah. And I mean, he's written other books that I didn't mention in here, but the book that he mentioned called
Jonathan. How did that? Amazing.
He listened, I guess.
Yeah. Maybe he had a dream.
Yeah, maybe he did.
Maybe he did. Yeah. Book number 5, Global Mind Change, The Promise of the 21st Century by Willis Harman, 1988.
Yeah. That one came into my life at a time that I most needed it. I was in the corporate world and doing the balancing act between staying quite practical in my everyday living within the corporate world, but also maintaining a spiritual perspective and spiritual life, and doing the balance with these two so that they would become one. Well, Willis, I don't remember where I saw that book first, but when I saw the title of it. It drew me to it immediately, and I started reading it. And I left his thought in there. If you don't like the way the world is, change your mind. Change your mind. It's your seeing out of what you see is your perspective of what the world is. So just change your mind. And I thought, so I wrote him a letter, and it only consisted of about 2 sentences. And I said, if it's possible, I really would like to meet you one day. And I said, because you have touched something in me that is quite deep. And the same week that he received the letter, I get a telephone call, and it was Willis. And that was the beginning of a lifelong friendship for the time that he was here. Yeah. And there's more to that story, but that book has continued to be an inspiration for me. Yeah.
So I'm curious to know, what did he write about the promise of the 21st century?
What did he say that one more time?
What did he write? I mean, what is the promise? What did he think was the promise of the 21st century?
I don't know that I can answer that adequately. Willis was able to see beyond the veils. He was able to see the potential that lies within all of us, and able to see the potential that lies within the species of humans, and was a wonderful reminder of don't get caught up in the webs of the dramas that go on. Keep your perspective. Keep seeing the larger picture. And that was one of the things that he was able to help me do. He was a co-founder of the World Business Academy. And he brought me into that, and eventually brought my husband into that, where we met, by the way. It's a great love story. But yeah, so it was always a wonderful adventure with Willis, because when we would meet at one of these meetings that the World Business Academy might have, particularly if it was in California, he and I would go on these hikes. We would go walking by the ocean, and we would talk about things that were just so large, because he never put down any of the crazy ideas I might have had. He would take the idea and he would expand it and explore. So he was a real inspiration in that way. And I think if he were to give a message now, which I kind of can hear him, is don't get caught up in the immediacy of the moment. Be aware, be present, but don't get caught in it. Keep moving forward, keep seeing the bigger picture, and then create that bigger picture.
And he's not with us anymore?
No, he died several years ago, but he is on my council. I've got about 33 on my John teases me all the time. I've got about 33 on my council, and none of them are walking around in physical bodies. Yogananda's on my council. Yeah, but Willis, yeah, he'll come. Edgar died a few years ago. And, Edgar Mitchell, yeah. And he too is on my council. So I can always tell when I'm doing something, an interview like this, it's almost like an invisible nudge. So I'll speak about this maybe later if we have time, but it was Willis that guided me to Edgar. And Willis was already on the other side, but he's the one who guided me to Edgar. And then the rest of that's history.
I've got to ask you,
Sure.
33 mentors, guides, 33 watchdogs.
Yeah, guides. They're my council. We have council meetings quite often. How that occurred, I'm not even sure where it began, but I had read somewhere that, if you're wanting to improve yourself, if you're wanting to grow, then look and see who is it that inspires you. And so I realized there are a lot of those that really, truly have inspired me, but they're not in physical bodies anymore. Yogananda being one of them, Sai Baba being another one, etc. So what happened is I began to go down the list. I thought, oh, well, this person inspired me for this reason and this reason. And so I began to put together this council and realized what I was doing is putting together a spiritual council. And they are all on the other side. But if you don't believe in telepathy, try doing that. And then notice the thoughts that will begin to come into you. To help guide you. And Willis definitely is very vocal sometimes.
Wouldn't I love to get 10 best books out of each of them?
Oh, that's an idea.
That's an idea. If you can put that into operation, please feel free. It would be really interesting to have Yogananda's 10 best books.
10 best books, right.
Yeah. Okay, so book number 6, As a Man Thinketh, by James Allen, published in 1902. Very small book.
Yeah, that book was a surprise. It was given to me by a friend in the business world. I was in my early 40s, I believe, and I was going through, again, some major changes in my life. And he just handed me this little book, and it's just a little thin book. And I don't know if you've read it, but I strongly encourage you and anyone who is listening or watching this, get that book if you can find it. The wisdom in it is ancient wisdom, but he's managed to say it in such a way that it grabs. At least it does me. And I have been so moved by that little book that I have given it to all my son's stepsons, who at the time that they received it were teenagers. I gave it to my stepson, to my husband, to my brother, to my family and to many friends, because of it's timely wisdom. It does not go out of date. It really doesn't.
Wisdom for the ages, yeah.
So if you get frustrated or just need a little bit of guidance, just open up that book and read a paragraph in it, and then bam, it'll be right on target with whatever it is you're needing. It's a good book.
Well, did you know that in 2020, someone took those words and published a book called As a Woman Thinketh? And it's based on all of his material.
No, I did not. I just learned something. Thank you.
So it was that form, if not the original form.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
I will look that up.
Okay, we're going to take a short break now. You're listening to a No BS Spiritual Book Club interview, and sharing her 10 best list of the most inspirational books today is Peace Ambassador, educator, author, and visionary Jeanne White Eagle, who circled the globe with John over the past 25 years as ambassadors of peace. And together with NASA Astronaut Edgar Mitchell, they co-founded the Interstellar Community Foundation. We'll be back with more on Jeanne White Eagle's 10 best list and the Interstellar Community Foundation's mission after this break. Stay tuned.
Times TV.
Maya Angelou once said that there is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you. I'm Sandie Sedgbeer, and when I'm not hosting Times Media's flagship radio show What Is Going On and the No BS Spiritual Book Club, I help people share their untold stories. Books are my life, my joy and my passion, and there is no greater reward than helping aspiring writers get their books out of their heads and into the hands of those who are waiting to read them. If you feel that you have a book in you but don't know where to begin, visit sedgbeer.com, click on the Work With Me tab and find out how my experience helping others tell their stories might be just what you've been looking for. That's sedgbeer.com, sedgbeer.com.
Imagine becoming a super influencer. Reinvent yourself, invest in your brand, and then manifest your success with a robust spheric approach. Om Times Media and Broadcasting offers a unique and multifaceted way to become the spiritual and conscious influencer you deserve to be by putting your message across our powerful platform with its proven record of integrity and excellence. Through our produced shows, Om Times offers the opportunity to become a social media TV personality, a radio show host, an Om Times magazine columnist, and a syndicated podcaster, all in one shot. By live streaming your show on Om Times TV and broadcasting it across the extensive Om Times radio and TV networks, you become more than a host. You become an ambassador and a force for positive change. Om Times. Open yourself to the possibilities.
Everything that we do, we can do in a contemplative manner. Through the art of contemplation, you can use the Jeanne keys in a really powerful way. Jeanne keys is basically the code book of life. In the Jeanne keys, the book is made up of these three levels: shadows, gifts, and cities. And the journey is through those three levels, kind of unpicking of the shadow states, the releasing of the gifts, and then the embodying of this higher consciousness called the Siddhi. And the Siddhis are very exalted words. And it's not like we kind of suddenly are all these exalted Christ-like beings, but we have flashes and illuminations along the journey. And the more we get stuck into the journey, the more illumination comes to us, because the more we're releasing the light from in these codes inside our DNA. So all those revelations are inside us. So the contemplative way is the inner way.
There are 16 million children struggling with hunger in America. That's 1 in 5 daughters, sons, neighbors, and classmates who don't know where their next meal is coming from. Yet billions of pounds of good food go to waste every year. It's time we do something about it. Feeding America is a nationwide network of food banks that helps provide meals to millions of kids and families in need. Visit feedingamerica.org to help them feed even more. Together, we can solve hunger. Together, we're feeding America.
Welcome back. Jeanne White Eagle, book number 7, The Quiet Mind, Sayings of White Eagle. There's a connection there for sure. That book was published in 1972. So tell us about the connection.
Yeah, well, first of all, the first connection is kind of obvious because of the name. I think it may be important to say where I received the name. And then, of course, when I begin to see writings or quotations by White Eagle, I'd be drawn to it because I had been given this name. We had mentioned 2 of Joseph Ryle's books earlier because they have made such an impression on me. And Joseph did become such a good friend and mentor. And when we first met, he had gone into vision, and he came out of it and had received my name, which is when he gave me White Eagle. And I go by that name now, which I did not for about 2 years after he had given me the name, because, coming out of the corporate environment and my family being fairly traditional, not traditional native, but just traditional Americans, whatever that means now. I knew that this might push some buttons. So I kind of stayed away from it because it was such a big name. I mean, you think of a white eagle, right? But it was about 2 years later that it became very clear. It's time now that you accept this name. And so in a ceremony that involved quite a number of people, Joseph blessed me with the name. And I said to the people then, I said, from now on, this is the name that I will be known by. And I remember Sandie, it literally felt like a physical feeling almost. Suddenly the name demanded of me an depth of integrity that even though I consider myself a fairly, a person who is, has got a lot of integrity anyway, when that name came in, it's like the name was pulling me. And that began to happen on a daily basis and has now over all these years. And so when I was with a friend in Israel, she came up to me and she says, I have a book for you. And it was a small book and it was called The Quiet Mind. And she said, these are quotations that White Eagle is said to have said, and White Eagle being a spiritual guide, ancient, who lived apparently many centuries ago. And there are a number of stories around that. I just took to it like a sponge to water. And from that day on, that's another book. I keep that book in a couple of different places around the house so that I'll even see the name of it, A Quiet Mind. And if my own mind is going like about 1,000 miles an hour, I'll see the title and I quieten down because I know what is inside the book. I know the wisdom that is there. So it continues daily. It continues to help remind me of what I was given and the responsibility that I have if I am going to allow this name to carry me. So.
And of course, students and experts in numerology will say, of course, you changed when your name changed because the whole energy, the frequency changed.
That's right. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Yeah. And to have someone with the credibility and with the wisdom that Joseph has as an individual, to have him have had the vision of what my name was. Then he did a painting, and I've got the painting of his painting me with this name.
Well, I think something like that is, you were anointed, weren't you?
It felt like it. It really did. And I guess it didn't just feel like it. I can say yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not a small thing. Yeah.
Well, Joseph is also the author of the next book, which is number 8, and it is sound. I could not find a date. There were so many imprints out there, and none of them actually gave me an accurate date. So
I'd have to go look. I could have had a copy here. That book is one of his more recent books. It came out not all that long ago, just a few years ago. So it is easy to find on Amazon.com and I imagine major bookstores. Yeah. But this book, let me back up and say much of my work has been in sound. And when I did receive the name of Jeanne White Eagle, of the White Eagle name, then I began to also receive dreams. I always kind of grin and say that that's the only time that God or the universe can get me still enough to where I'll hear. So that I was to begin doing my work with sound. I am trained as a classical performer. I have been singing since I was a child and trained for the stage. But when all of this started happening, the voice, which is quite a large voice, began to take on a new frequency about it. And I was shown how to use sound in such a way that you actually can shift the vibrational field, not only of your physical body, but of the surroundings around you. And I've got some wonderful stories that we could spend several episodes on in my describing that. But Joseph's book is quite inspirational. What he does in that book that has inspired me is he goes into his own Native American wisdom and pulls very poetically some of the teachings and brings them forward into the present day, so that as you're reading this, you find yourself between levels of reality. It's, in fact, with Joseph's writings, period, I find that I have to read them more than once in order to understand the depth that is in them. But in this book, he also has his paintings all throughout the book. So as you look at one of the paintings, you receive information. And it's intuitive. It'll go into it. It's beyond the thinking mind. Mm-hmm. And so I keep this book close. It's another one of those that if I need some wisdom on a particular subject, particularly if it's spiritual, I'll open it up, and there'll be something that, at the onset you think this doesn't make any sense, but read it again, and suddenly you see the truths that are deep within what he's saying. So I encourage anybody who's, interested particularly in the deep Native American wisdom. This is an excellent book to read. Mm. He's a mystic. And he's a master mystic. Yeah.
Book number 9 is A Course in Miracles by Helen Schucman, published in 1976.
Yeah, that one is kind of interesting. As I shared in my description of it, it came into my life somewhere in my mid-20s. It's one of those books. The title is what caught me with that one. And I just liked interestingly enough, because I don't know that it's changed that much. The cover changed that much. The cover of it, actually, the feel of the cover caught me. And so then I began to hear about all these courses that were being given on this particular book. And I didn't really attend any of the courses. I just picked the book up and began reading it. And it's not one of these books that I read from cover to cover. It's one of these books that I discovered that if I would just open it, then there again was the wisdom that I was looking for. And for me, this kind of thing is beyond religion. Any of my spiritual books that I get inspired by, I don't want to get caught in the dogma of anything. Yes. So in the Course of Miracles, when, Christ is mentioned as often as it is, I look at that from a larger perspective. And I look at it from the perspective of speaking with a voice of love. Mm-hmm. And those are the glasses that I look through. But that book has also just kind of been there. I've got a copy of that one by my bed. And it's another one of those that if I just see the title of it, it rings something in me that needs to remember the wisdom that is there.
Mm. Yeah. Book number 10, World Peace and Other Fourth Grade Achievements by John Hunter, published in 2013. And could we not learn a lot from this book?
Isn't that the truth? Isn't that the truth? I was listening. I think that that particular, I was hearing a radio interview on NPR here in the States, and I was blown away by this story. He's a fourth grade teacher who, with his fourth grade students, created this game. And what he did is the game was giving these students all the major world problems, like poverty, like hunger, like war, any of these things that conflict. And so he just gave it to the kids and asked them, to solve these problems. And what these children did was no less than a miracle. Is this game came out of it. They began to come up with solutions for each of these problems. But when he saw what was happening, and he was interviewed on a number of radio and TV stations, brought before the Pentagon when they found out about it, and these generals who couldn't solve these problems, they'd been working on some of them for decades, said, how did they do it? And what John told them is they looked at it as a whole. They didn't try to go in and solve individually. They looked at the whole thing. And then they were able to see what was needed here, and created this extraordinary game that helped to solve the problems of the world. And, adults need to listen to the children, need to truly listen to these children, because they have answers that adults do not have because they got caught in their ego games.
Yeah. So I wonder what happened, those generals who were in awe of this.
Yeah, think about that. About that. It depends on how strong their egos were.
Yeah.
So,
well, that is your 10 best list. And usually it's not uncommon for people to try and slip a few more in. And I'm usually quite strict, depending on my mood. But we can't ignore the 11th book, because this is the book that kept you inspired and on track with the vision you were given. And it is your own book, Eyes Open, Looking for the 12th, Blueprint for a New World.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about this book and why we should read it.
Well, what I often say to people is everything that you have gone through has brought you to the point that you're at now. And that is clearly true of myself. Everything that I've gone through has definitely brought me to the point that I am now. And this particular book occurred as a result of my having gone to Edgar Mitchell, thanks to Willis Harmon, who opened that door. And when I shared with Edgar Mitchell this vision that I had been given in a recurring dream that started in my teen years, that went on into my 30s, I said, I see this, but I don't want to waste your time, so I'm going to put all the details into a book. So the book was actually written in order for Edgar and me to have a launching pad to have deeper and deeper conversations. But I didn't write the book until 2014. So it wasn't all that long ago. But why this is important is this recurring dream that I said started in my teen years. It went on into my 30s, then it disappeared. And I didn't think anything of it at the time because I was busy raising a family, and went on into my 40s. And it wasn't until 2009 that the dream came back. And this time when the dream came back, I was given detail. I was shown what I had seen earlier in the recurring dream. I was given definition of what I had seen. What I had seen in the recurring dream were two scenes. One was of my standing at the bottom of a high hill, and on the hill was very futuristic buildings. The second scene, and I kept seeing it over and over and over again. No verbiage went with it. I just saw the scene. The second scene in the dream was of my being in a hallway that looked a little bit like it could have been something like a university, or some one whole wall was transparent, and people were passing each other in the hall as though they're going somewhere, and I would say to class or whatever. I looked closely, and they were not all human. They were other species. And this dream, these two scenes kept coming over and over and over again. 6 weeks would go by, and then I'd see it again. And I never thought anything about it because it wasn't given any verbiage, and it didn't last very long. But when it came back in 2009, I heard the words, "You're to build a university." Now, understand that a university in my lexicon is the highest that I know or knew of the most sophisticated of a learning facility. And I know now that it may not be called that at all. But when the dream came back, I was told these are to be built all over the world. And what I was being shown were interstellar communication centers. So it was a place where human beings would go. Their consciousness would be raised and sustained at a high level. And then those other beings coming in from other systems, advanced beings, there would be communication that would begin to happen on a regular basis. And I had somebody say not long after the dream came back, is you're being asked to build Starfleet Academy. So if anybody, watches Star Trek, but it's Starfleet Academy, I guess you could say, with a deep heart, because this has to do with helping the human race get to, and I'm talking about the entire species, that the collective consciousness gets to a place to where the higher level of a frequency is not only brought in, it is sustained. And I was told in the dream that it would take a couple of generations at the time for humans to get through the PTSD that they've created for generations. And so the dream now is bringing in the people from around the world, and there are people showing up everywhere who know that they are somehow part of building this. I was given blueprints. Edgar said I was given a blueprint. And I was actually given configurations of buildings, how they fit together so they create a particular frequency. But all of this, the detail is described in the book. The whole point here is we've got, let me just, so that I don't, okay, it's about liberating our full human potential, achieving planetary consciousness, and taking our place in the cosmic community. That's the whole purpose of the whole thing. So all this is described in my book, and I've got a copy of it here. But I'm showing you this because I don't know if you can see.
It's reversed.
Oh,
it's reversed. Yeah.
That's okay. It's all right. What you see is you see a baby there. That baby represents the human race. Then you see the Earth, which is the Earth moving forward into a new way of being. And then on the back of it, you can't see it from this, but is the configuration of how the buildings are meant to fit together so that they create a frequency that shoots a beacon into space and acts as a signal. I don't want to take up any more time on that. It's the reason I go into this book. I constantly refer to it because it helps me to, when I was writing it, much of it are transmissions that are coming in. And I just opened this just before coming on with you today. And I've got a quote in here that's from Tom Kenyon's The Hathor Material, which is another one of my favorites, by the way.
Mine too.
In terms of human evolution, love is where you're heading. And that is kind of the guiding light that keeps us on track. So I don't know if I went all the way around Robin Hood's barn.
No, it's fascinating. Yeah. And I am familiar with what you're saying. I'm very familiar with what you're saying. I have a question.
Yeah.
Who are the 12? How will you know when you find them? Have you found them?
Well, here's an interesting thing, and I don't know if any of you who may be watching or listening to this knew Lawrence Bloom, who was a wonderful Brit from London and who knew God and everybody, and he was a very dear friend. But Lawrence, when he first saw this, he says, Jeanne, I kind of think this might be a metaphor. And I said, well, it's very possible, because I actually, Sandie, have met many more than 12 who have seen something similar to what I've seen, or they may have seen almost the exact thing and have painted it or, written about it in poetry, etc. But yeah, I think the 12, it's much more than just 12 people. And yeah, there's a story behind that too. But anyway, it gets people's curiosity up. And if they'll read the book, then they'll find out that there's a lot more in there than just trying to find 12 people. Yeah.
So the foundation, it's a hub for this international community.
It's kind of the umbrella that is, it is through the ICF where we receive donations to help us keep the lights on right now as we are in the foundational phases of building this. But it is a place where that we created, Edgar, along with John and myself, and then Lawrence came on board, and then Barbara Marks Hubbard. There's a wonderful story to that, came on board, and there were some others as well who said we need to put something into place that can help get the vision manifested. So the name that is mentioned in the book is University and Interstellar Communication Centers, because they are to go up all over the world. But it was such a mouthful, and God bless Barbara Marks Hubbard, who became a very dear and loving friend. She kept spitting it out. I said, we'll have to find an easier name for this. So that's how we came up with the name Interstellar University. But that is the vision, and the ICF's responsibility is to manifest it as quickly and as well as we can. So I encourage anyone to go on to Google and look up the Interstellar Community Foundation, and you'll find the website there with more information.
So prior to the work with the ICF, your love for children and teens led you to co-found the Up on the Mountain organization.
Yeah,
Teens at Risk.
Yeah, I wish it still existed. It did not continue after we moved away from this area. We've returned back to it now, but this was back in my 40s, and I always have had a soft spot in my heart for teenagers, and I love children at all levels, but I especially love teenagers. Because they're going to push the boundaries, no matter what. They're going to push the boundaries. And that's kind of what I've done my entire life. So I do understand it. And we created this particular organization years ago for teenagers to, what John and I did was offer them skills to deal with their anger, to deal with whatever was going on with them. But we were not about religion. We were not representatives of the school system. We were not part of the judicial system. We were not anything that would threaten them or help them not be completely open with us. We were just two people who loved teenagers, and who both of us came into our marriage with quite a number of skills in dealing with conflict and in other areas that would, help a teen. So every Tuesday, a whole group of teens would come and gather in our living room. We would get pizza and juice. And what we did was give them a safe space to be heard.
Yes.
We had a gang member come in one evening, and some of the kids were really wanting to know, why did he become a gang member? And he said he found someone who would listen to him, who heard what he had to say. And so that's what John and I really attempted to do. And it's what I've done over all these many years anyway. But that particular organization was put into place for that reason. But teens, children play a major part in the Interstellar University vision.
I know. Yeah. I'm sure. Absolutely sure of that. This is fascinating. I wish we could go on, for another hour, but we can't, unfortunately. But I do want to speak to you again, for sure, because you've lit up so many light bulbs for me as we've been talking. But Jeanne White Eagle, thank you for sharing your 10 best list of spiritual books with the No BS Spiritual Book Club's library of recommendations.
It's been an honor, Sandie. Thank you. Thank you.
So you can learn more about Jeanne White Eagle's books, dreams, visions, passions, and workshops at Jeanne, JEANNE, whiteeagle.com. And you can learn more about the Interstellar Community Foundation at https://interstellarcommunityfoundation.org. That's it for this week. I'm Sandie Sedgbeer. I'll be back at the same time next week with another 10 best interview for the No BS Spiritual Book Club. Till then, it's goodbye from me, and thank you again to Jeanne White Eagle.
Thank you, Sandie.